something that specifically stood out for me when I read your book, and you touched on that slightly just now, but at first you had planned to ask great questions with each medical appointment that you scheduled, but then each time your answers were kind of left unanswered or not completely answered. And then later throughout the book, you explain that there were questions that you wanted to ask during your visit, but then you decided against it. And I see this a lot in healthcare. That's why I wanted to bring it up. I see that patients often start off strong, wanting to be really involved in their care and communication, and they do their research, and then the system kind of disappoints them, and they feel that they're sort of being ignored or overlooked, and often they're not taken seriously. Ultimately, they sort of feel like a sense of defeat. So can you explain your personal experience of how this process made you feel?
Well, I wrote a book about it, so it will take a long time. I'm not going to explain the whole thing, but it was as I went to the doctor the next day, and I thought I'm going to know what this is in a few days. How it was a big lump in my arm. It was not something buried deep in my organs that no one could see or feel. It wasn't some mysterious thing. It was this big lump in my arm. Um, and so I just sort of thought, okay, I'm going to find out. And then they kept saying, okay, well, get the sonogram. Okay, come back in a few weeks. And then when I thought it's time to go back to get another sonogram, my doctor said, oh, no, that's not what they said. They said, no, I said, it's time to get a PET scan because it's still here. No, that's not what they said. They said, get another sonogram. And by that time, I had all these other symptoms. And the doctors were wanting to treat those other symptoms. And no one was sort of saying, we've really got to figure out what this lump is in your arm, which was the primary problem. They always wanted to kind of divert from that and make it something else. It was very, very strange. And, um, you know, uh, I had to go to about 5 doctors before somebody said, we need to biopsy this. That was the most obvious thing in the world. And
Mhm.
it really took 5 doctors to say this, and to sort of, so your question is there's a lot of you have to take a lot of tests when you have a problem like this. Um, and my experience, and it may not be everybody else's, well, there are two things. Women are used to getting tested for cancer all the time because we get mammograms. And when you get a mammogram, my experience is they really, if you have a problem, they find it and they are really vigilant about figuring it out what it is. They don't say, come back in a few weeks and, if it's still there. That's not my experience. This, this was sort of the opposite. This was like, oh, don't worry, it's something else. It's a swollen lymph node. So there was like a real resistance to wanting to do something. And so it was very confusing because my experience with getting mammograms is like, we're not letting you out of here until we know what this little speck is that's as big as a grain of sand. Um, but this was like, oh, come back in a few weeks. Oh, it's no big deal. Oh, it's fine. I mean, it was very confusing. And no one wanted, it seemed like no one wanted to see if I had lymphoma or see what the hell this thing was. And then once I
Sure.
did get a biopsy, I didn't understand that biopsies come in 3 stages and they're not, it's not just one thing. And and I eventually had to have surgery in an operating room to get a biopsy. And that was, a month after, 2 months after I went to the doctor, a month after I went to the doctor. So there are many, many stages to finding things out. And unless you have some appreciation for that, which I didn't, because I had never been through it, I didn't know what was going on. Um, and even just what's a biopsy? It sounds it sounds like it's one thing. It was actually 3 things. So is- so this unless you have a doctor who really, uh, I don't know what the word is. I'd like unless you have a really good doctor who just zeroes in on this, you can end up kind of in it was like a vortex or a wind tunnel of just um, doctors who want the other doctor to tell you what's wrong. That was my experience. A lot of people may say, no, when a doctor thinks you have cancer, they do all these things. And, I hope that that's the case I hope that's the case for a lot of people, but it wasn't the case for me. Having been through this, I now know, I now know the landscape, and I know if that happened to me again, I would know exactly what to say and how to say it and what to demand. I didn't know those things, but I was also scared. I was so scared that I had cancer that it I didn't I didn't insist the way that I would have that the way that I would now.
Sure. Sure, no, that makes sense. So, as a private patient advocate myself, I have clients with all sorts of different preferences, personalities, and some are ready to really jump in with both feet when they have a challenging medical situation or something unexpected come up. They, do their research, ask their questions, and start kind of running with it, and like to start at least. And then some have me more there involved. As a
Mhm,
backup when needed. And they kind of want to run and have me as a backup. Others, really kind of want me to sort of drive it, and they, want me to kind of sort of take over and do the research, kind of give them the recommendations, and
mhm,
not be as involved. And either way is totally fine. It's definitely preference. In your specific situation, you seem to have started really strong, determined, and, done your research, and I love that. Having, determination and strength is really essential in any type of scary diagnosis.